purpose of this experiment is in the title. We wanted to test squirrel activity in different levels of succession. In this case, early, intermediate, and climax. What is succession? Succession is a natural pattern of ecosystem change that takes place over time. This event usually occurs after either natural or human-caused disturbances, including agriculture, timber harvesting, hurricanes, and fires. Many factors play a role in the rate at which succession occurs. In a climax succession, the community is left to thrive under particular environmental conditions for an extended period of time. In this stage, density and abundance of species within this community remain the same, and invaders are usually unsuccessful in their attempts to survive and reproduce. It is important to note that although stable, a climax community is never permanent due to changes in the environment constantly occurring. We got observations on the species of Squirrel, watching actions such as scatter hoarding, foraging, resting, and other actions as well. Squirrels are mostly known to eat things such as nuts, acorns, berries, and flowers. These food sources typically come from mature trees. Availability of these food sources can affect the distribution, density, and overall activity of squirrel in the forest habitat. So for this experiment, we hypothesized that the climax community or higher succession level would result in more squirrel activity because there would be more access to food.
The mammalogy class at Bridgewater College was also doing research on squirrel activity for the Auburn Squirrel Project. We used the squirrel activity data provided by that class to use in our comparison of activity to succession type. The data measured activities such as travel, rest, scatter hoarding, foraging, and alertness in 20-second intervals over the span of 10 minutes. We collected the class's notebooks and copied the relevant data into spreadsheets so we could analyze the data. The data was collected throughout the fall of 2019.
In order to obtain succession data to compare to the squirrel data, we needed to go to the sites where the squirrels were observed. When we arrived at each site, we tried to pick an area representative of the habitat of the entire location. The date, time, and weather were recorded at each spot. Once a spot was picked, we'd measure out a 10 by 10 meter quadrat to standardize the area of each time of data collection. After measuring the quadrat, we began taking DBH, or diameter of breast height data, using a specially calibrated DBH measuring tape. Each tree over 15 centimeters DBH had its DBH value and species identification recorded in a notebook. Stem and small tree counts were also obtained at each site as another variable to determine succession. We used the previously mentioned methods at each site.
Site 1, Briary Branch Road, Ashby, Virginia.
This is a time lapse of us measuring and marking out a 10 by 10 meter quadrat.
Here we are measuring and recording the DBH of a large tree within a quadrat.
28.5. All right, cool.
This shows us getting counts of small trees and stems.
There's 10.
Site 1, Briary Branch, we determined was a climax community.
Site 2A, Stonewall Riverside Park, Elkton, Virginia. Site 2B, along the South River in Grottoes, Virginia.
We determined that Stonewall Riverside Park and the site on the South River were habitats at a stage of intermediate succession.
Site 3A, Purcell Park, Harrisonburg, Virginia. Site 3B, Oakdale Park, Bridgewater, Virginia.
Purcell Park and Oakdale Park only had one tree over 15 centimeters DBH in their respective quadrat. We determined they were both in an early succession stage.
To condense the squirrel activity data, we developed two categories for their activities. We categorized each activity as moving or stationary, and we totaled up the amount of time spent at each site performing either moving or stationary activity. We then compared the differences in moving and stationary activity amongst our three succession types. In order to compare another dependent variable, we also tallied up the number of instances in which the squirrel was seen in a tree or on the ground. We compared those differences among each succession type as well.
This graph shows mean times plus or minus 1 standard error spent by each squirrel performing moving or stationary activities. The data is shown against each of the 3 succession types. While the squirrels showed more time moving overall when compared to stationary, there is no clear difference in time spent moving or stationary when comparing the 3 successional stages. This could be due to small sample size of squirrels.
Shown in this graph is the mean instances plus or minus 1 standard error in which a squirrel was spotted in a tree or on the ground in their respective quadrats. The differences in the instances between each succession type shows a pretty clear trend. In the spots we determined as early succession, squirrels were more likely to be seen on the ground. As the succession type gets more complex and into the climax communities, squirrels are more likely to be seen in a tree.
This is a visual representation of our hypothesis. So we hypothesized that we would see less squirrel activity represented by X in the early succession, and that we would see an increase in overall squirrel activity into the later succession. Unfortunately, our data did not either refute or support this hypothesis, so we move on to a new proposed hypothesis. This is a visual representation of what our data actually showed. In the early succession, we saw more squirrel activity on the ground, and on the late succession, we saw more squirrel activity in the trees. We hypothesize that this is because the abundance of trees is higher in the late succession, so the squirrels have to spend less time on the ground searching for food, and in the early succession, they have to spend more time searching for food. If they don't have to spend as much time searching for food, they prefer to be in the trees because that helps protect them from certain predators. The results of our experiment are significant because they give us insights as to how different successional stages can affect the location of behavior of squirrels.